All right. What's up, everybody? We're here with Stefen Delevaux, the man, the myth, the legend, ETH Denver. I first saw Stefen when I was online on Twitter. I feel like the year after I graduated college, I was like, who are the black men doing stuff? And I saw this guy. And I finally connected him back in December. We finally connected at Art Basel. And I went to his conference, Oasis On Chain, last month. It was his first time doing that. It was super dope to hear people talk about consumer and crypto applications out in the Bahamas. It's a huge market out there, building for people. And yeah, I'm excited to finally get you on the podcast because I've been chirping at you, trying to get your attention for a little bit, and I'm glad they're finally making it happen. So how's Denver been so far?
Denver's been cool. There's so much going on. There's so much going on in this place. So many people to talk to, so many people to catch up with. So it's been chaotic, but that's what it looks like every year. I didn't spend much time in the main venue. This is actually the first time I've been in.
Oh, us too.
This week. See? But had a lot of good opportunity to talk to, potential partners and just a lot of good people who are doing really cool stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm really trying to keep up with the new projects that are coming out, people I want to keep up with in general. So it's been really good.
Makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. And coming here, what were some of your goals? Like, what were things that you wanted to advance?
So it was kind of twofold. So first of all, I did, the main reason I came up actually was to help out Guild, had an event called Guild Day. So I helped out with that.
And what's Guild?
Guild is a community-focused, I would say a DAO tools company. That's how they started, but they've expanded quite a bit into just digital communities in general, including like Web 2, not strictly Web 3. But they've been good friends for a long time. So they needed some help. So I said, yeah, I'll come put on the event, and it was really good. They did a really good job. Really happy with how that went. So
yeah, I'm happy to hear that. And you have a background in DAO tooling as well, having worked at Governor in the past. And like, I'm curious to hear like what your Web3 journey has looked like that's gotten you so close to DAO tooling. To me, even coming to your Oasis, it feels like community is a super big thing for you. And even talking to Carlson in our last interview, I feel like Web3 and community almost go hand in hand all the time. And just the internet and community, Yeah. We find people to interact with. We don't just interact with AI chatbots until now. So how did you end up in this space, and like what does Web3 kind of mean to you being here today?
Yeah, I mean, it goes way back. So my background is in economics. That's what I studied in school. I graduated, kind of ended up falling into finance a little bit. But I was never really a finance person. But when I started just paying attention to tech in general, I found fintech, and fintech seemed really cool. Mainly because of two reasons. One, at least in terms of the narrative, it was more accessible, and it was different from like traditional banking, traditional finance. And I really started following that space for a while, and I realized really quickly that the narrative wasn't quite true in the sense of it was, of course, completely connected to the traditional financial system, and it wasn't accessible, especially not in the Caribbean, in the global South in general. Like even if you think of like Venmo and Cash App, right? We have no access to it in the Bahamas or in the Caribbean in general. So around that time, I just got kind of jaded with the narrative of fintech, and pretty soon after, maybe a year or two, I've heard like crypto before, but I had never really dove in or dived in. And then I started actually looking into how blockchains work as a technology, and that's when the light bulb went off, and that's when I said, oh, this is actually what I've been looking for this whole time. Something that is a different system, and it is globally accessible by default. So from there, I realized, okay, I'm just gonna spend time in blockchain, and that led into like the Caribbean Blockchain Alliance, which is a nonprofit focused on like advocacy and education in the Caribbean. And then even a few years later, I dove heavily into Web3, but really fell in love with DAOs. And then to connect it back to school, my undergrad thesis was actually on worker co-ops, like cooperatives in general.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. And then when I started paying attention to DAOs, I realized it's pretty much the same thing. So it always comes back to community. It always comes back to like worker ownership and collective ownership and things like that. And just empowering people. No matter what the goal for me is, just always empowerment. So.
And did you come into this space knowing you wanted to work in this space? Like knowing this was like the future of your career?
Yeah. I knew I was going to basically like dedicate the rest of my
And when did you know that?
to it.
I feel like that's a huge question.
I'd say that same point where I realized like how blockchains worked, and I say, yeah, this is it, because this has always been like the question of access and empowerment and ownership and all these things have been really important to me for a long time.
Yeah.
And I realized blockchains were the best way that we could actually help people and like empower people and put people in a better position. So,
And what are like 2 ways that you really see that as like possible? Like,
I mean, DAOs are a huge thing. But even outside of that, just access to crypto in general. It's access to payments. It's access to transactions. It's access to a system that no one can shut you out of. And for people in the global south in general, that's really important. So that's why I'm so focused on things like education and like even showing people what crypto is. And how they could use it and how it can like change their lives. That's always something I've been interested in and involved in.
I mean, it's a lot of sense. And how do you see like what do you want your impact to be from this space? Like inside that, like if you had to quantify it, like in any kind of way.
That's a really good question. I would say, to be honest, like I'm from the Bahamas. I live in the Bahamas. If I can make life easier for the average Bahamian, or even the average person in the Caribbean in general, I'm happy with that.
Like what kind of difference? Like what is that? What is that? What do you think that looks like? Like yeah.
Yeah, I would say even going back to some of these problems, I'm not going to dive into all of them, but
Yeah, no, you don't.
just access to banking and finance in general is something that is taken for granted in many places. But it's a huge need. Even like being able to transact, which is something that's super basic. But whether it's like cross-border payments, whether it's like sending wires, whether it's just being able to send something to a family member or like on a different island, for example, it's not easy. So yeah,
and it's like an issue people come up against regularly, is what you're saying.
All the time, every day.
Every day.
For sure. So I mean, just being able to access a new interaction, a new type of system where they can actually use things and do that much easier.
Do you feel like that slows things down in the Bahamas?
Slows down, yeah.
Tremendously.
Sure. It's one of the biggest problems for sure.
This financial inefficiency.
Inefficiency, but also just complete lack of access in a lot of ways. Because also, if you're whatever industry or whatever you do, being able to interact with more people throughout the world is really important. And if you're at least partly blocked from that, you're stagnated in a lot of ways, where you can't even do things to the best of your ability, and you can't get like maybe rewarded or paid for the stuff that you are good at doing. So it's very basic, but it's very fundamental.
I got that. And I guess I'm curious, what's been one core memory in your Web3 journey? Like to kind of round us out of the interview, like. Yeah.
That's a really good question. Honestly, I would say probably above anything else. Like I've been in this space maybe like 7 years, but above anything else, I have to say doing Oasis. Oasis On Chain was like, for me, one, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Thankfully, I had a good team around me. Shout out to Guava, but it was incredibly difficult to just make happen. Like events are huge. A lot of work, but it went so well, and so many different points and instances during that conference was like, yeah, this is awesome, and this was worth it, and it had impact, which is like, that's everything. So to me, that has to be the best moment for sure.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I would say like that felt like the start to my year. I feel like last year, the start to my year was ETH Denver, my crypto conference here. I feel like I was excited to come to Oasis also because it's like a conference in a predominantly black space, and like I don't know when I'm going to any other conferences in predominantly black spaces. And so it was cool to meet people who are familiar with the space, not familiar with the space, just learning there, and really cool to see that you're really opening the doors for that kind of stuff. I'm really interested in how can we start to organize conferences in Philadelphia that are maybe oriented towards students of color. In Pennsylvania, I'm talking to Circe a little bit about that. I was talking to Carlos a little bit earlier about he wants to do one in Cape Verde, which I think is super dope. And so I think it's like this education empowerment conversation. I think it's so important that people actually take steps, to actually create the space for the conversations to be had. Because I feel like it is intimidating, this like technology. Like just any technology you're not familiar with.
Right.
And so I think holding people's hands a little bit so they can hold other people's hands, I think helps things move forward a lot more rapidly. So I'd have to commend you on the work that you're doing. And I'm excited to come back to Oasis next year. And it's going to be bigger and better. You all should definitely be at Oasis next year. A phenomenal vibe for the winter. Where we at? We're out in the Bahamas. There's beaches, beautiful beaches. You can go swim with beautiful pigs. You can go to Atlantis. You can hang out with the vibes. Stefen's there.
He said it. I didn't even have to say it.
So it's a vibe. If you want to come. And so, yeah, thank you so much for taking time to do this interview with me. I'm keen for my audience to be able to continue to follow what you're up to, and excited that we get to give you a platform and that you're here at ETH Denver doing what you're doing. And in the space, you're just doing what you're doing.
Doing my best.
We them niggas, and you're representing.
Got to. Because if we don't do it, who's going to do it?
Exactly. So, yeah, man, thank you so much. You want to shout out where people can find you?
Sure. I'm always on Twitter at Stefen Delevaux, so STEFDELEV. You should also definitely follow Oasis On Chain, one word, on Twitter as well. That's the best place, for sure.
Oh, yeah. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hope that you check out some more of our content. Hope you go follow this guy everywhere, and hope to see you at Oasis next year. Maybe you'll be on the podcast. Peace and love, everybody. Booyah. You got to say booyah, too.
Booyah.